So just to kind of highlight that, it's like, how much do you trust your email providers? Should you be trusting them with your content? Should you be trusting them with, you know, your relationships with individuals, where you're emailing from, and then kind of an added element of, you know, what legal jurisdiction are they under? So who can compel them to do certain things? As we know, NSA has these programs, they have relationships with other spy agencies, and we want to basically provide some minimum level of effort that they need to go into in order to get the content of our communication. So just throwing out some alternative ideas on email. So there's some nonprofit email providers. They don't have a profit incentive to be surveilling the content of your emails. So I previously mentioned RiseUp, which has very good security. You could also think about potential commercial providers outside the U.S. Maybe that, if, for instance, the NSA is an adversary, maybe that would be something helpful. But as we know, in the case of Hushmail, there are existing legal mechanisms by which the U.S. can gain access to non-U.S. companies' data. So ultimately, you want to be taking that responsibility for yourself and ensuring that your email is encrypted. That way you don't have to be relying on your trust of some corporate provider on the security of your communication.
And if you paid attention to the Silk Road shenanigans that happened recently with this guy, Dread Pirate Roberts, who got caught selling tons of illicit stuff via an anonymous website. The way they got access to his stuff was using an MLAT, a mutual legal assistance treaty with Belgium, to basically say, this guy's breaking the law, we want that stuff, give it to us. And so the legal angle, you can't, I mean, there's technical threats, but there's also a whole bunch of legal threats that you can't sort of just not think about. Maybe there's maybe more serious, because we can get past things like you have all the links connected, but they can still get the stuff in the clear on the server, and it's still proper.
Yeah.
How do ISPs then play into it? So say I'm Azerbaijan, right? And I have my local ISP.
Yeah, and there are, some loopholes to that, there are some exceptions, but that's for the most part that's true.
So, I'm running to my ISP, sending out the Google service in the cloud, which may be hosted who knows where, to another, Google customer who's usually attacked.
Yeah, so this is a great example of wanting to think through your threat model, or in the sense of like, what are the tools that I rely on? What are my adversaries potentially have access to? So if you're an Azerbaijani activist and the Azerbaijani government does not have a relationship with Google, then maybe Google is a potential choice for you to be more secure versus whatever email address your local ISP is providing for free. So it's all about kind of thinking through, but if you're an Azerbaijani activist who the NSA is also interested in, then that's potentially not going to be enough. So it kind of depends on the situation and context that you're in, but it's always something that's really important to keep in mind.
And part of the problem is it'd be probably very hard to figure out what the legal relationship is between the Azerbaijani government and Google, right?
I was going to say, what is that little database?
Exactly, right? And so that's why we're focusing on sort of technical mechanisms. Certainly, if you're using the Chrome browser takes extra steps, specifically with Google promise in a lot of cases, to protect you even more. So but there's so many caveats.
And so also kind of going off of this, and I think works into in terms of like physical security, is if you're putting yourself in the position such that they are required to actually approach you for your emails, that can be a good thing, because then you actually know that they're interested in your emails, right? And obviously there's certain circumstances where you don't want that to be happening, but just having that added element of basically being notified that that's happening can be tremendously beneficial, even if ultimately they receive a court order and try to compel you to give up your password or something like that. That still requires them to think through their process and think through the legality of their request. So just going off of this physical security element, is PGP encryption also encrypts the email locally. So if your computer is compromised that has your email on it, that email is still encrypted. So that's great. If it's confiscated at a border crossing, etc.
Network itself. So,
some brief gotchas before we get into it. So subject line is not encrypted. So don't put interesting things in the subject line. In addition, depending on your, you want to make sure that when you're drafting emails that it's already encrypted. So by default you have encryption on, because if you're drafting your really super important, secret sensitive document and you're connected to Gmail, which auto saves drafts every 5 minutes, and it's unencrypted, then you've just sent that email to Google like 10 times before you finish sending it in encrypted fashion. So those are the types of things just to keep in mind. I don't think we need to go into digital signatures or attachments.
Well, maybe we could just talk a little bit about the basics of cryptography. So that is always the kind of thing that you may think is painful, but it's actually not. So very basically, if you want to give something to somebody in a secret way, you can, like, for example, put whatever you want to give them in a box and lock it up. But then you have this problem of, well, if I'm going to send them this box, I have to send them the key somehow. If you both can find a way to make the key without anyone knowing that you're set. But the way that this was solved in the 70s was very clever. You don't necessarily need a key that both locks and unlocks. You can have two keys. One key that locks the box and one key that unlocks the box. The cool thing about that is the key that you use to lock the box, you can give to anyone, because all they can do is lock the box. And you can keep the unlocking key very carefully to yourself and never give it to anyone, which means that anyone can lock boxes and give them to you if they have the lock, and only you can unlock those boxes. And so what we're going to be doing today is generating what's called a key pair. One of the keys you can give to anyone. In fact, we put them on our web pages. This is called your public key. And your private key, the secret key, the very sensitive one, is the one that will only stay on your computer, and you have to be very careful. And so that's sort of how we do these things. Now, signatures are actually interesting. They're it's basically a testing to the authenticity of a document. And the way you do this is by basically using your secret little key to basically put a little piece of what looks like gibberish at the end of the document that someone can use your other key to verify. Anyway, and so don't worry about that so much. Just know that it's a very mathematically rigorous way of verifying that a document, one, came from you, and two, hasn't changed. So usually what you'll do when you send an email, in most cases, is you'll sign it so that it says it's from you and it hasn't changed, and then encrypt it. And then when someone opens it to themselves, they can check the signature, make sure it's from you and that it hasn't changed, even when it was in its encrypted state. So that's how powerful this can be.
And this is also helpful when you're emailing individuals who you don't know if they have a PGP key pair. So if you can't, for instance, encrypt your message to them, you can still sign the message, verifying the authenticity of your message. If you have any attachments or whatever, that also verifies the authenticity of the attachments, showing that they haven't been modified in transit from you to them. So signing emails, signing attachments can still be a very helpful thing.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
So the PGP, that works when both parties have.
For encryption, yeah.
For encryption. So that's a requirement. Like you can't just be okay.
Yeah. And so obviously that's a call to arms to get more people using, GPG.
And if you get email from me, you'll see it starts off with PGP hash message, and it's really a way of signaling that I'm doing something with crypto foo that I want you to see for the most part. And but if you're interested about that, I can tell you more. I send all my emails signed, which some people think is controversial, but whatever.
It's all good.
It's all good.
And so another thing to keep in mind is, depending on how you send messages that have attachments, sometimes the attachment names are also unencrypted. There is a mechanism by which called PGP mine, where you send emails that have attachments where it's all encrypted in one big block, and so that way the names of the attachments are encrypted as well. But something to keep in mind, try not to have sensitive titles for attachments, unless you do PGP mine.
You should also avoid large attachments because of the markup with mine. There's like 130% markup.
I mean, most mail providers don't allow larger than know, 15 or 20 megabytes.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah, so just as like a final summary before we split off into groups in order to set up and install, I mean, this is all part of like a risk security equation. So you're just trying to create some minimum level of security such that your adversary, whoever it may be, must exert too much effort in their mind in order to try to surveil you. And so this includes making it very difficult for dragnet surveillance, which means that they actually have to find some type of probable cause in order to target you directly and your communications directly. Obviously, this is not saying like this isn't a magic bullet that suddenly secures all communications regardless of anything. This is basically a step that
And you might have heard of.
can be very useful.
Yeah, if they can break into your house and put a keylogger
Yeah.
on your computer, there's a good chance they could catch you typing in your secret password and unlock your secret key. And so,
Yeah, but what's nice is when they break into your house, you know that they broke into your house, and so there's kind of that added element.
I'm not so much.
But
Well, the Tor browser.
I don't know what your house is.
Okay.
Basically, takes the header.
Anyway, we've got some further resources, but we're going to walk you through setting it up yourself. This is the four of us that's going to be helping you guys. Let's go into the hands-on section.
So make sure if you want to set it up now, make sure you have a connection to the network.
Yes.
And then we want to make sure you have
Firefox version
GPG, which is the open source version of PGP, Thunderbird, which is a mail client made by Mozilla that makes it really easy to do that, and then we'll get this thing called Enigmail, which is a plugin for Thunderbird that allows you to do all this stuff without thinking about it a lot.
And so,
Yeah, in fact, yeah, we sure can. I have a version of it up on the net right now, but it's not this one.
Yeah, that'd be great. And what's the operating systems that we have?
Yeah, what do we have here? We got some Macs.
Because it'd be great to split off into respective
some-
operating
yeah,
systems.
that's a good idea.
Mac, Windows, Linux.
Windows.
Okay, Windows, all raise hands.
Windows.
Okay, and Macs.
Macs. 3 Macs.
Okay,
Got any
awesome.
Linux?
You Linux? Okay, awesome.
I got this one.
Oh, yeah.
I got it.
Alright, so we've got 4 helpers. We're going to have 2 groups in here, maybe the 2 Windows. We'll have all the Windows folks in here, and we'll split them up into 2 groups. And then we'll have all the Mac folks. Sure. In there, split up into 2 groups. Yeah. Does that sound good? Okay, awesome. Thanks. Get cracking.
I was connected and then I got
starts here, that starts tonight, that starts now.